Check 1 2 1 2 1 2 and check 1 2 1 2 1 2 and check 1 2 and check 1 2 and check 1 2 and here we go. Check 1 2 1 2 1 2 and check 1 2 1 2 1 2 and check 1 2 and check 1 2 and check 1 2 and here we go.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to What Would Charlie Shoot? Thank you for joining me today. We are on episode number 2. Rolling right along. We're starting out strong, and I'm going to go ahead and get to answering some questions today. I'm going to tell you about some up-and-coming things that are happening, which I can get you involved with as well for your photography. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you a couple stories today as well. And so first things first, I am embracing nature today. I decided there is no perfect situation when you're traveling to go ahead and actually record. And so I said, I'm just going to embrace the sounds the best I can. We have things like motorcycles in the streets. We have dogs. We have cats. We have, there's actually a pig in the street where I'm working at the moment. And the pig kind of likes to talk every now and then, just makes sounds in the streets and things like that. So, oh yeah, I'm going to embrace the sounds. But first things first, I want to answer some questions today. I got some interesting questions from my students this week, and I want to go ahead and start out a new segment in these podcasts to answer your questions so that everybody can learn from this and everybody can grow. So one of the first questions that came up this week was, why does it seem like most people are professional photographers these days? That's a great question, and I think I can break it down into 3 things for you technically. There are 3 styles of professional photographer. There's the ones that actually do it full-time that want to make a living. They go into great depths to make a company. They make actual business entity and things like that. There's the second ones that are weekend warriors. Weekend warriors are the people that want to pay the gear. They want to go ahead and do it for fun, do something inspiring, things like that. That's great too. And then the third one is the ones that call themselves professional photographers, but really they are not professional photographers. And that's okay too. You can go ahead and dream. You can go ahead and aspire to become a professional photographer. If you take my class, I'm happy to help you out with that as well. But anyways, those are the 3 kinds of professional photographers. And really when it boils down to it, I think that a professional is simply someone that makes money doing it. Because if you have a camera, and if you know enough about what you're doing with your portraits or your weddings or whatever you do, I think that you can be a professional. Now, back in the day, there's a lot of people that used to say, hey, you had to learn manual mode, you had to do this, or you had to do that. But I think really it boils down to knowing enough that you can actually get someone to give you money as a photographer to become a professional. Now, I might be in a minority about this as an opinion, but if you have a different opinion, feel free to leave me a voice message here on the podcast or drop me an email, something like that. I'd love to hear your response on that. But that's why I think that most people seem like professional photographers these days, is because everybody's trying to do something. Everybody's trying to push the envelope to do something that they love. So that's cool. The second question that I got this week, how can I protect my photos from being used without my permission? Well, in 2022, that's a great question. There's a lot of things out there with social media with privacy and liability issues. So if a photo exists online, I think that anyone has access to it. Anyone can try to copy it or download it. Yes, there are laws and things like that against it, but technically if you put a photo online, you don't know what somebody's going to do with your photo technically. And so if a photo is used without permission, the first thing is to go ahead and file a DMC, a Copyright Act, to go ahead and have a takedown notice put out on there. And then also contact the person and simply ask, hey, can you take down my photo? A lot of times, sometimes people don't know. They might not understand what's going on with copyright and things like that. And so if you drop somebody an email or contact on there, just tell them, hey, that's my photo. The third question that came up this week is, why do wedding photographers charge so much? Well, I know everybody out there is on a budget these days. It depends on where you're at, what you do, things like that. But wedding photographers charge for various factors depending on the market that you're in. For example, if you're in a large city like New York, or if you're in Los Angeles or something like that, you're going to be charged a lot more than if you're in a very, very small town in rural America or other parts of the world. The reason being is photographers have higher overhead to worry about. There's higher tax rates, there's higher things that they have to worry about with things like liability insurance. Really, when it boils down to it, a photographer does not charge you for just taking the pictures. The photographer charges you to run a business. There's a lot of overhead that goes into running businesses, such as business licensing. There's websites. There's other things that you have to worry about with different various softwares and things like that. And what a professional photographer does is breaks down all those costs into their daily pricing so that they can actually go ahead and pay back their business and they don't go into debt and they don't go out of business. So what you're doing by hiring a professional wedding photographer is you are supporting them and their business. And this is really, really important, I would say, with any type of photographer. If you support a photographer that's a professional, you're actually supporting the photographer and the business in that case. And so if you enjoy the photography, please do support your photographers out there, because that's why they charge so much, because they have a lot of overhead to work with. The other question that came up today is photography soon to be, if not already, obsolete art? This is a deep question. I would say a strong no to that question. The reason being is there will always somewhat be some style of photography out there. Photography is almost about 200 years old, and so over the years there's been many different styles of cameras. And back in the day, in the early 1900s, there was basically an embracement of black and white photography. You'll see a lot of old pictures that were in black and white. The reason being is people could not afford money for film to get color pictures back in the day. And so if you look at the history, when color film became more affordable, people started embracing a new style of photography more in the color pictures. And when people embraced color pictures, there were different cameras that came out on the market that were faster, more portable, and cheaper. And when you get into those kinds of cameras that embrace the snapshot, or the Polaroid moment, or Kodak really got into the market in that case as well. But if you go back in history on there, I don't think it's obsolete because it's evolved. If you fast forward a couple of years to the 90s, in the 90s there was the first digital cameras that came about really strong on the market. So you had a 1 megapixel camera back in the day. Now, if you had one of those cameras, you're pretty proud of it because that's the first digital camera that came out on the market. But it really didn't take that great of pictures because the technology was not there yet. But fast forward a couple, maybe about 10 years down the road, and 10 years down the road, you had better cameras that came out with maybe about 3 to 5 megapixels, and you thought you were just cruising along making your pictures. Well, fast forward again to 2022, and you have these DSLRs, mirrorless cameras, and other things that are on the market that blow that out the water. Everyone's asking also this week why film is still relevant. And I think film will always have a soft spot in a lot of people's hearts technically, but when you think about the technology that we're talking about today, the technology has come along so far that it makes more sense to take digital pictures these days than it does to take film pictures. Now, film pictures still exist on the market, but if you're actually a film photographer that gets hired by someone, you're in a very niche market. You're possibly in the wedding market, or you're possibly in the portrait market, depending on what you do. And that's where a lot of people will still actually hire for this sort of thing. A lot of people simply want their pictures quicker, more efficient, and that would be digital these days. And so film is definitely a niche. I still have a lot of students that actually want to learn how to do film. Some of it is actually walking in the footsteps of others. Some of it's actually thinking about slowing down in life. Some of it is simply learning something different because digital is kind of cold and unforgiving sometimes. But yeah, that's what I think about photography being an obsolete art. It will exist in some shape or form for many, many years, and I don't think it will really ever go away. Now, one other question that came up this week, and this is the last question I'll answer for now before we get into some other things, is do we still need professional photographers now that cell phones and cameras can take good pictures? The answer is yes. There will always be a market for professional photographers as well. The reason being is honestly some people out there are simply lazy. They want to take their pictures very easily, and they want to have really great pictures. And so that's what you hire a professional for, that actually understands things like composition, understands how to manipulate the camera to get the best results, and understands how to work with people. If you're not experienced in photography and you don't know anything about composition, or if you don't know anything about light, or if you don't know how to pose, That's where a professional photographer could really come in handy, because they can give you those things, whereas playing around on the cell phone, so to speak, I mean, it's great because people have the ability to do self-portraiture these days. But really, when it boils down to it, professional photographers will never go away, because that is definitely an in-demand skill that can come to play. There's a lot of people that might say, hey, what if I don't like the pictures? That comes into play too, because if you don't like the pictures, you're in the wrong market with the wrong photographer possibly. Make sure to look at work from photographers before you hire them. And make sure to sit down and talk with your photographer to make sure that you're on the same wavelength, same page, things like that. Because if you hire a professional photographer, you're investing into them and you're investing into their business as well as the pictures that you get. So be sure that you're aware of that. Sit down with your photographers, have a coffee, have a beer, something like that, have a chat. Now, getting on to other things for the day. I want to talk about some brand new projects that are coming up to give you some exciting news. And getting along with this brand new podcast is going to be one of them. This is brand new. This is my second episode of podcasts. I've been in music before in my life, if nobody knew that about me. But I've never actually done a podcast before, so this is a first. If you want to go ahead and drop me an email, or if you want to go ahead and drop me a voice message or something like that here on the podcast, I'd love to hear from you and hear what you think about this. And we'll go ahead and we'll adjust the format as we go together. But that's one thing I'm working on with it at the moment, is the podcast. And then the second thing I'm working on, I just announced a brand new Udemy class. If you've not seen it yet, it's on the link on my website on charlienaebeck.com. And if you go to the website, you can actually get the class free until October 17th. And normally it's a $29.95 value, and so you would have to buy the class. But right now I'm giving it away for free to the first 1,000 students before October 17th. So if you haven't seen it yet, jump over to Udemy and search How to Improve Your Photography, a Gift You'll Love. And you'll be able to take my class free between now and October 17th. So if you want to send that link to all your friends and family members, please feel free. That's a great opportunity for everybody to go ahead and start with photography. Now, another thing I'll bring up right now in addition to that is, if you are taking my online class, or if you want to learn, please feel free to drop me an email or go ahead and contact me, because I am actually celebrating 33 years of photography at the moment. I'm offering a 15% discount on all the classes that are coming up with all the coaching sessions. And so if you want some additional support to go ahead and do a one-on-one session with me so that you can actually get the best out of your photography, please feel free to drop me a line. Now today, to wrap up, I want to go ahead and tell you a couple of stories. So one of the stories I want to bring up is one of my students asked me a while back what was some of the best moments and some of the worst moments in my photography. I'm going to tell two stories today. One is one of the worst moments, which is when I was first starting out as a fashion photographer back in Detroit. I was brought in for a campaign to shoot some clothing, and we put together a great team. We hired a model, and we were all set. On the day of the shoot, the model contacted me and said, "Hey, my grandmother passed away." I said, "I'm so sorry, that's really rough, and I'm happy to go ahead and reschedule the shoot," all that good stuff. And long story short, later that day I was on Facebook, and I saw her posing with one of my best friends in Detroit, and he is a photographer as well, and she had shot with him that day instead of actually doing the work at the campaign on there as well. And so all I did is I replied, "How's Grandma?" And long story short, the model blocked me, and we never spoke again. That was one of the worst moments because the campaign fell through. I didn't get paid, all that good stuff. And so that's among one of the worst. One of the best moments is when I was starting out as a photographer. I was given my first camera by my grandmother 33 years ago, and I'm celebrating this October as we speak. And I was sent to Orlando, Florida with my family to go and take a vacation. We went to Disney, and we were on Main Street, USA. There was a grand parade, and they were celebrating a Disney experience. And I saw Winnie the Pooh, and I had this little backpack in my hands, and I had my camera inside. I took out my camera, and just remember I was so happy to make that first picture. While it's not technically correct, it's not perfect. I look back at that photograph and I just remember one thing: be happy. So those are my stories, and I'm sticking to it. Thank you so much for joining me today on this second podcast. We're getting the formatting down on this. We're experimenting. We're having fun doing it. If you have any ideas, suggestions, or comments, please feel free to leave me a voice message here on the podcast, or please feel free to go ahead and drop me an email as well. I'm happy to hear from you. And I will see you next week, same time, same place, and we'll go from there. Thanks so much for listening to What Would Charlie Shoot, and have a great day.